Great to be joined by Doug Derraugh, the great coach at Cornell University on the women's side, even though he was a tremendous player on the men's side, graduating in 1991. I know you don't want to talk about the 1989 ECAC championship at Boston Garden. That's a story for another day, Doug. Great to visit with you.
Thanks for having me, Pierre. Yeah, we can leave that out of the conversation.
Oh, you've won enough since then. So many great stories. First of all, I just want to start. You were I can tell you this, and this is for all our viewers and listeners. You were a tremendous player for Brian McCutcheon at Cornell University. I had to coach against you when you were playing there, and you were really good. After you were done in 1991, you spent almost a decade and a half playing pro hockey in Europe. Can you talk about that experience?
Yeah, I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to go over to Europe right after playing college hockey. Went over there right away and played 13 years professionally in a bunch of different countries, primarily Germany. I was in Germany for 9 or 10 years, a little bit in Finland, a little bit in Italy, a little bit in Austria, a little bit in Norway. So yeah, I got to experience a lot of things over there. Absolutely loved it. Was very fortunate to be able to play the sport that I love and do it professionally.
How has that helped you as a coach? Understanding the trials and tribulations of all the travel, the different coaching ideologies, the different way the game is played in different countries. How's that helped you as a coach?
Yeah, very fortunate to have so many different experiences and be able to bring that to my own coaching philosophy. And, having been coached by coaches from so many different countries, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Russian coaches, Canadian coaches, American coaches, having been able to play in North America and experience the coaching over here at Cornell, and having great coaches throughout my minor hockey. But then, you go and play on a bigger ice surface, some different strategies, some different ideas and philosophies from different countries. And so, obviously you have to be who you are as a coach and be authentic, but certainly learned a lot from a lot of different people and a lot of different backgrounds, and certainly try to implement a lot of those things in my own coaching.
Is there one strategy in particular you can say, yeah, I got this in this country or I got this in that country that really helps define what you are like as a coach?
That's an interesting question. I think that, there's some drills that I still do today that are named after, I've got a Berlin drill, I've got a Landshut drill, I've got, some drills that you pick up from over here. I've got a Detroit Red Wings drill, a Dallas Stars drill. So I think you pick little pieces from all over. And I think you also, learn both. Sometimes there's things that you don't like about certain coaches or you don't think worked. And so you don't want to use that yourself, and you want to make sure that you stay away from sort of those problem areas. And then certainly there's lots of things that I picked up on the positive side of the ledger that I wanted to continue. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of great coaches over the years. And I don't know if there's anything in particular that I can say, maybe, one thing in Europe, when you're on the bigger ice surface, you tend to trap a little bit more. You're a little less aggressive on the forecheck because it's such a big ice surface. You learn to angle really well and get above your checks and those kind of things. So there's probably some things there that I learned, on the bigger ice surface. And also European coaches tend to be, a little bit more of a trapping style for the most part. Although I think that's changing now. Our European coaches also like to regroup and get a lot of flow and a lot of pace and a lot of speed. And so they might do a little bit more, with that, the neutral zone and on their breakouts and so on. So you take little bits and pieces from everything, and then you try to mold it and make it your own. You hear this from coaches all the time, right? That's what we do. We listen to other coaches, we steal the things we like and use them. And, sometimes it depends on your team too, right? I think that, depending on your personnel, depending on, what you have for a team, you sometimes base it around your strengths and weaknesses as a team too.
It's interesting that you say that. One of the things that I picked up when I was coaching with Scotty Bowman in Pittsburgh, was the importance of getting star players extra room. That was your responsibility as a coach because matchups were such an important part of the game. Last year, you coached, in the previous 4 years before that, you coached Izzy Daniel, obviously one of the best players in college hockey in the last 10 years, in my opinion, anyways, on the women's side. Did you ever think about doing stuff like that to get her away from all the checking matchups that might have been there?
Yeah, you definitely try your best. At the same time, you want to make sure you're getting her on the ice and giving her opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
do what she does. And so, um, but yeah, you definitely, you try to sometimes, if you're, especially when you're away and it's hard to get the matchup you want because they're getting the last change, sometimes you just try to get them off the ice and then throw them back out there. Little things like that. Or, obviously if a team is ice the puck and you've got a chance to get them out in an offensive zone face off. You want to get them out in those situations, or you see an opportunity where maybe you're trying to line her up against a certain D pair or against a certain line. You try that. Definitely, it's easier at home when you have the last change, but certainly on the road, there's sometimes little tricks here and there that you can do to try and get those players. But you're right. You want to get you got to look at your personnel and figure out how do I put them in the best possible situation to be successful and to make the most of the skill set that you have on your team.
One of the things I really admire about your teams, and you in particular, coach, is the fact that you've coached so many star players that have gone on to represent their country internationally. And I'm just curious, how do you develop them? Because the list for you, it's amazing. Ever since 2002, I've done every Olympics for the women's side and the men's side. And every time I go break down the rosters of these different countries, I'm like, played at Cornell, played at Cornell, played at Cornell. How do you coach those players? Because clearly you're doing a magnificent job with those types of players.
Well, obviously it starts with, recruiting, and they've got to be the ones that want it. So we really try to recruit players that want to get better, that want to be the best they can be, that are willing to put in the work that it takes to play at that level. And so, maybe we're fortunate that at Cornell that we've attracted those kind of personalities, that kind of character, but also that skill level, right? They've got to have some innate, whether it's genetics or some sort of a skill set that allows them also to be able to get there. But as a coach, there's nothing I love more than that. I love that challenge of trying to help a player get to the next level and trying to figure out everything I can that we can do to help them to get there. And, sometimes you see a young boy or girl and you think, oh my gosh, if it's a boy, let's say they're going to be the next Sidney Crosby, or if it's a girl, they're going to be the next Breanne Jenner. And then maybe at some point, a few years later, you look back and where is that little girl? Like, how come she hasn't become Breanne Jenner? And what is it along the way that prevented her from getting there? So, I love that challenge. You get a player to a certain level. Okay, what is it that player needs now to get to that next level? And trying to figure that out for each player, because every player that we've had that's gone on to play at the national team level needed something different to get there. They were all different. You look at all of our Olympians and national team players, they're all different people. They got a different skill set, and needed different things sometimes to get over that hump, to get to that next level. And I love that challenge of trying to figure out what is it for, you know, Breanne Jenner or Rebecca Johnson or whoever you want to pick, that they need to get to that next level to reach the goals that they want to reach as a player, and making sure that we're looking at every possible angle to try and help them. Now, that said, this is where, they've got to have that personality that they're willing to do the things that they need to do to get to that next level. You might tell a player, well, you need to work on your skating, and they go shoot 500 pucks a day, which is great. Their shot's getting better, and that's great. But are they working on the areas of the game too, where they need to develop to have a chance to, whether it's playing in the PWHL or it's playing in the Olympics for their national team or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
hockey wise, that they're looking to achieve?
What's changed the most since you became a real dominant, in my opinion, as a dominant force in women's college hockey? What's changed the most in the women's game?
I would say it's the level overall. I would say when I first started coaching that, you had sort of the superstar players that were kind of in their own element. Then you had sort of a middle ground, and then you had kind of a layer that just weren't going to make it. And now I feel like the bottom has definitely come up. And now I think in college hockey, yeah, excuse me, it's important to, yeah, you want to get the quote unquote superstar player, but you don't have to have necessarily the superstar player to have success, because there's many more players now that are really good and can play at a high level. And I think if you get the right people, the right character, the ones that do want to put in the work and are willing to do the work to get better each and every year, then you can still have success without necessarily having the quote unquote, you know, superstar player, that top 5 recruit. And I think this year for my team, it's a good example of that. We've got really balanced scoring, balanced attack. Yeah, we've got some big stars, but I do think that nowadays it's much more even. The leagues are much more even, and so you can win without necessarily recruiting that number 1 recruit in the country.
When I was a kid growing up in Montreal, kids would say, I want to shoot like Guy Lafleur. I want to skate like Bobby Orr. I want to play goal like Ken Dryden. The role models were so apparent for you and I as young kids growing up north of the border. Do you hear the women now talking about, I want to shoot the puck like Marie-Philippe Poulin. I want to dominate the game like Rebecca Johnston. I want to, all these. Do you hear the young women talking that way?
Yeah, definitely. They now have the PWHL, so they're watching the PWHL games. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they watch the national teams and the rivalry series and all of that. But even on my own team, pick Rory Gilday, who's probably got one of the hardest shots in the NCAA.
You
right
can
now.
bring the heat from the back end. I agree.
So some of my players would be like, how do I shoot like Rory? And so, well, there's a little bit of genetics there too, and
Yep.
Just a big strong player that can really shoot a puck. But there's also technical things that you can work on, and certainly going and shooting extra pucks never hurts. But it's also it's quality of shot, it's quantity of shot, it's getting in the weight room, getting stronger, working on all these things to develop your shot. And it's amazing how often you see somebody who goes and shoots a lot of extra shots in the shooting room, or works on her shot after practice. As the years go on, they become your top goal scorers. And so, again, it gets back to having those players that are willing to put in the work. They're the ones that have to do it. As a coach, you want to give them the tools, you want to teach, you want to give them the opportunity, all of these things, but in the end, it comes down to the individual wanting it, having the passion for it, and willing to do some of the things that maybe aren't their strongest suits. And so, again, it comes down to their character.
Do you have a favorite line of moment from the men's side and a favorite line of moment from the women's side?
Lots of them. Favorite moment. Obviously the Cornell Harvard rivalry is huge. When I was here, we had an opportunity to play them in the playoffs, best of 3 at Lina. So that Cornell Harvard game was always a huge event, let alone getting to play them in the playoffs at Lina. And they had a really, strong team at the time, and we did as well. So I remember that series being really exciting and a fun one for us. But certainly there, so many moments at Lina. It's such a great atmosphere, and it's a big part of why I came to Cornell, because it just hockey is the big sport on campus, and you've experienced it and you've been a part of it and you've seen it. And on the women's side too, we're just lucky that we have a community that loves hockey and appreciates the skill of the game, and loves to come out and support us. We've had a lot of great games at Lineup. Probably the most exciting one, I guess. I don't know from a coaching standpoint if it's my favorite, but from a excitement standpoint, I'd say probably. I don't know. I don't think it's still the longest game, but at the time, I think it was the longest NCAA tournament game in history. I think we won 8-7 against BU in triple overtime. But it was an insane kind of game because, I wouldn't say the best coaching game I've ever experienced. But we went down 3-0 in the first 5 minutes. And then we come back, we go up 7-4 in the third period. And then I think there's only maybe 11 minutes left. They tied up 7-7. And the men were supposed to play after us. So all these fans were coming in for the men's game. And this game, and both coaches, I think, at the end of the game thought it was going to end quickly because, everybody was scoring like crazy. And then neither team could score in the overtime, of course. And it ends up going triple overtime. And then the game-winning goal, one of our defensemen, Lorian Rougeau, ends up going coast to coast, and beats everybody and scores pretty amazing, one of the most amazing goals ever here. But some of the fans after that game came up to me and said, not only was it the best hockey game they'd ever been at, but it was the best sporting event at Cornell that they'd ever witnessed. And so anyway, so it was an exciting game. I wouldn't call that necessarily my favorite in coaching, but it was pretty crazy.
That's such a good story. And that speaks to the great legacy and tradition of Cornell hockey. There's no secret. I've done your games on TV since you've been coaching. I coached against you when you were a player. I'm a big fan. How does a young kid from Arnprior, Ontario, make his way to Ithaca, New York? Because clearly you've made your whole life basically in Ithaca, outside of your time playing in Europe. How'd you make your way from Arnprior, just outside Ottawa, down to Ithaca?
Well, I credit my parents. Gave me the opportunities at a young age to get on the ice a lot in Arnprior. I also credit, the recreation director in Arnprior. Used to let me on the ice for free before school started. So I went out and he gave me a job at the rink. So I was, rink rat, and then I became the Zamboni driver. So I think having parents that were willing to do anything to help me get to rinks and drive me around and be able to give me those opportunities. And then I wanted to be at the rink as much as I possibly could be. And I had people within my town, and being from a small town, they wanted, I guess, to help me out and gave me ice for free and gave me opportunities to be able to get, as a Zamboni driver, I could, at the end of the day, when the rentals were done, I could skate all night if I wanted to. So as long as I flooded and mopped up and locked up the rink and everything, at the end of the day, I had the rink to myself. And so just very fortunate to grow up in that environment, and have those opportunities as a young person. And then, I got to go play junior A hockey in Hawkesbury and moved there. And then the CCHL, and, some teams came and liked what they saw and had some different, opportunities to go to some different places. In the end, I thought if I didn't make it as a hockey player that I wanted to be a surgeon. And so I worked pretty hard in school to keep my grades up. And I thought at Cornell, I thought it was the best opportunity, or had the best balance of both, to be able to get an Ivy League education at, what's considered to be one of the top schools in the world, and also play hockey at, place where hockey is the number one sport, and had a real tradition for ice hockey. I thought, it's the best of both worlds. And so that's how I kind of decided and landed on Cornell. And so that's, they came and watched me. They liked what they saw, along with, had a few other opportunities, but in the end it came down to that. And then after school, I took all the pre-med coursework and everything, but had an opportunity to play pro hockey. And that was, I guess, what I was most passionate about, and went that direction.
Legacy means different things to different people. What's Cornell hockey legacy mean to Doug Derraugh?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm, proud alum. I just love what this university is about. And, it is about, putting in the work. I do think there is a blue collar feel to the school that, you have to earn your degree. And when you graduate from Cornell, you'll know that you put in the work. And I really feel that the things that are most gratifying in life are usually, not always, but things that are hard to do, and things that you worked hard to achieve. And I just did not see, as I said, I didn't see another school that had the level of both that Cornell offers individuals. And so we've got, players on our team, like we talked about, that want to play in the national team and want to play at PWHL, but we've also got people that want to go out and save the world and, be doctors and surgeons and be great people in the community and all those things. And so we're just really lucky that we attract those people. And I love I love the statement just by Ezra Cornell: any person, any study. So, got everything from agricultural to business to engineering to architecture. And there's just so much going on at this place, and it's just a lot to absorb. And so was just fortunate to have the opportunity to be able to live the life that I've been able to do and be able to spend, as you well know, doing something that I always tell our student athletes to find the things that you're passionate about, try to go out and do it as best you can. And if you can make a living at it, I'm not saying that all your happiness is going to come from your profession, but it is going to be a big part of your life. And so just try to find those things that you really love and that you're passionate about, and go out and try to make a living at it and try to do it the best you can. And if you have the opportunity to do it, man, it's rewarding.
Has your job as a coach changed a little bit because of the way the PWHL is growing?
Yeah, a little bit. In that, it used to be that really for the girls, the women, there was, there's opportunity to play a little bit of professional hockey in Europe and a little bit, in North America, but it wasn't really fully professional. And so it was about, what am I going to do with my profession outside of hockey? Mm-hmm. And it was, okay, I'd like to try to get the national team, but I also got to think about, the other side of my life. What is it that I'm going to do, professionally in my life? And now there is more discussion with players like, I want to play in the PWHL. Maybe I'm not quite in the, whatever you want to say, in sort of the mix for a national team, but I think I've got the possibility of playing in the PWHL. So now there's that opportunity for these young student athletes to consider playing professional hockey in the PWHL afterwards. So there's that goal as well. It used to kind of be the national team or a professional job or a career. Now it's more, I could play hockey, or I could play in the national team, or I could, so it's just more opportunities now for them. And that's terrific. It's great, the support that the PWHL's getting. And that's awesome that they now have the same opportunities as the guys.
You're coming off a big weekend sweep over Clarkson and St. Lawrence at home. Obviously, now you go on the road and play at RPI and Union. You're in first place in the ECAC as we do this taping right now. Is there something you want to see from your ladies going forward that's going to establish this is the bar for Cornell hockey the rest of the way, and we're going full bore to win X?
Not really. It's just getting better, right? We've got to be playing our best going into the playoffs, and there's things still that we need to do better to achieve X, right? And so it's really just, I know you hear this from coaches all the time, but it is about the process, and it's about, we've got to get better in this, and this if we're going to have success and be able to achieve X at the end of the year. And so from here on out, and everybody's playing for something now, right? It's not, a few years ago, the bottom teams maybe were already out of the playoffs and they still had something to play for, but, maybe weren't quite as. Now everybody's got something to play for. And so it's just each week there are certain things that we're like, okay, we got to get better in this area. We got to get better at this. And focusing on doing that so that you're best prepared to have the opportunity to achieve X at the end of the season. And so just being mindful that we just got to keep working to get better every week, wherever we end up. And, we know we're going to be in the playoffs, but the only way you're going to have success in the playoffs if you've developed those details and habits and consistency that's required to have success in the playoffs. And so you can't just, everybody wants to do X, but who's willing to get prepared, do it when the time comes.
How do you describe the parity in the ECAC on the women's side? It's mind-boggling how competitive the conference is year in and year out on the ladies' side. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's it's challenging as a coach, but it makes it more fun. It's really competitive. Just like I said, right? It doesn't matter where you're going each weekend. Doesn't matter who you're playing. Um, now if you don't show up, you're losing, and um, so it makes it, like you said, really exciting. I think what we got 6 teams right now in the top 15 in the country, something like that. But doesn't matter, what position you're in the ECAC. If you don't show up that night, you're losing. And to my point early on to your question about what's kind of changed, that's what's changed. I think back when I had, or when we had, or any team had sort of the superstar players, there was nights where, yeah, probably you wouldn't show up, but you'd still win just because you were that much better than your opponent. Now you don't do that, you're losing the game. And so it makes it exciting. It makes it competitive. It's probably adding a few more gray hairs to my head, but yeah, it's exciting. It's fun, and it's challenging.
At least you have some hair to worry about. I marvel at the competitive balance of the ECAC and where it's come from and where it's going long term. A big part of that is recruiting. I look at your roster, I follow your team pretty religiously. You're basically diversified. And I know some of the young ladies you have committed going forward. How do you pursue the recruiting avenue of this? How do you look at it as a coach? Do you pick an area? Do you just deal with areas that you know? Do you try to find new areas of recruiting? How do you do it?
Yeah, it was interesting. Early on, we were a little bit more heavy Canadian than American. So people would say, well, are you biased towards Americans? Now, I think we're more American than we are Canadian. I'd love to get more Europeans. I always say that, if, pick your country, if, the 10 best recruits were coming out of Sweden, we'd take 10 Swedes. It's really just, um, it's really just trying to find, trying to get out there. I do like to get out on the road. I like to be able to, um, see recruits and be able to watch them. But quite honestly, you really got to rely on whether it's associate head coach or assistant coach or even maybe your volunteers, whatever it might be, you know, they're the ones that do a bulk of the recruiting. And so you really rely heavily on them to make good decisions and to come back with you with good information and to do a good job in that regard. And so really got to credit all the coaches that we've had here over the years and our coaching staff for doing a good job in that regard. But I wish, it's funny, we talked about, I played a long time over in Europe and I've yet to get a player directly from Europe. So, that's an area that we would like to be better and expand. So hopefully we can start to, do a better job in Europe, but it's you try to cover as much ground as you possibly can. You try to gather as much information from the network that you have and the coaches that that are out there, and find those coaches that you trust that are coaching in junior and high school and so on. And obviously you lean on that network too, and you hope that they're being honest about their opinions on players and so on. And I think most people are. And but it takes effort, it takes time, it takes energy, and but do we really target a certain area? No, not necessarily. But it is challenging because sometimes we go out watch players. They've also got to have the transcript too, right? So we got to get information on how they are academically, how they are as people, their character. Find out all these other aspects as well before we decide on how heavily we're going to pursue a recruit or not.
I've watched for years the Cornell Harvard matchup and the intensity of it. I've watched it Cornell Colgate on the men's side as well, and I know how intense that is. Tell me about and I know Cornell women and Harvard women have a ton of fun getting after one another in battles. Tell me about the Cornell Colgate matchup on the women's side.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sort of evolves from year to year. I think there's some teams that, from the past that would say that, Harvard is our big rival. You talk to others, it's Colgate is the big rival, or, and year to year, it seems to fluctuate, depend on who you kind of meet a lot, in big games or in playoff games. And so it's interesting to hear from the players how they have a different opinion on, who their biggest rival uh, would be. But definitely, Colgate's one that's close by. And so our travel partner. So that's, always a nearby rivalry. Harvard's sort of the traditional one that's always been a big rivalry between the two Ivies. And so, but each year it fluctuates. Sometimes it just, there's one group of players that just keep, playing against a certain team year after year for whatever reason, and that maybe becomes the next rivalry, So it doesn't really stay steady for each group of players that I've had here. But traditionally, yeah, it's been sort of the Cornell Harvard, and then I guess Colgate would be the one that's close by, the local rival.
I know teams every year, and this will be the last one for you, Coach. Teams every year set team goals. Individual players set individual goals, but usually they're team goals. I don't know if you guys do that or not. I'm going to bet you probably do. Was one of your goals to host the Final Four of the ECAC on the women's side this year?
We don't state, like, it's not a goal that, obviously we'd love to be able to do that. But it wasn't a goal necessarily. No. I'm not one really to set the long-term goals per se. You know, let's say you set a goal where you say, well, our goal is to make the playoffs. Well, that means that you're conceding that you're going to lose a game. Right. So, so we're just trying to get better every day. And we go into each game, wanting to win. We're competitive, like any group is, right? So, but as I said to you earlier, it's was it failing to prepare is failing, that saying. Who's willing to do the work that it takes to win in the end, right? And who's willing to consistently put in the work that it takes to win in the end. And that's usually what it comes down to, how your habits and details, in playoff time, you're going to fall back on your habits and your details. And, were we consistent enough over time to have success at the end? And we go into every game planning to win. And so don't really set long-term goals. We just try to stay focused on day in, day out. I know it's cliche. I know everybody says it, and it's difficult to do, right? It is. It's, it's human nature to look ahead, but, what are you doing in the meantime so that when that time comes, you're actually prepared to have success? So,
Coach Doug Derraugh, we cannot thank you enough for being part of the ECAC Decision Maker Series. I loved watching you as a player, except when I had to coach against you. I really enjoyed watching you grow your brand at Cornell on the women's side. And we just can't wait to see you do great things, both in the ECAC tournament and the NCAA tournament. Thanks so much for your time.
thanks for having me, Pierre.